감사합니다. 예, 맞습니다. 발표자 저쪽에서 하시면 됩니다. 사람입니다.
잠시 후 1시부터
May I have your attention, please? This is housekeeping announcement. We will soon begin the 2022 International Arctic Shipping Seminar shortly. So I'd like to ask all the participants to be seated. Thank you.
본 행사는 영어 동시 통역이 제공됩니다.
And just for your convenience, simultaneous interpretation will be provided for the seminar. If you need interpretation, please make sure that you use the receiver placed on your table. Please select channel 1 for Korean and channel 2 for English. And those joining the seminar online, please make sure that you activate the interpretation function at the bottom of the Zoom screen and select your language. And also, those joining in person here, please make sure that you turned off your mobile phone or to put it in silence mode. Thank you. And once again, to prevent the spread of COVID-19, we would like to ask all the participants to wear your face covering at all times as long as you stay in the conference hall. But for those presenting on the stage, like I do now, you may be allowed to not use your mask. So once again, those joining us online, if you have any difficulty or technical issues getting the audio feed from the headquarters here, please let us know or leave a message on the chat bar on your screen. So once again, the seminar provides the simultaneous interpretation both for Korean and English. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask your questions. Once again, you can utilize the chat bar on the YouTube channel. This is live streamed for all the participants, so we will collect those questions and have them answered at the Q&A session at the end of the official program. Hello everyone. I'm Kim Gi-tae from the Institute of Arctic Shipping at Yongsan University, and I will be your MC for the 11th International Arctic Shipping Seminar. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for attending the seminar out of your busy schedule. Now, let us start the 11th International Arctic Shipping Seminar. And this seminar is held as part of the 2022 Arctic Partnership Week. Before we begin the opening ceremony, let me introduce a distinguished guest, but unfortunately, due to time constraint, I cannot introduce every one of you, so I'd like to ask for your understanding. So let me just briefly move on to the first order of the program. As part, Mr. Yoon Hyun-soo, Director of the Shipping and Logistics Bureau at the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, will deliver opening remarks. But unfortunately, Mr. Yoon has urgent matter to attend, so he couldn't be with us here today, but we have his welcome and opening remarks on video.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Yoon Hyun-soo, Director General of Shipping and Logistics Division of the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries of the Republic of Korea. I'd like to express my gratitude to all the participants to the 11th International Arctic Shipping Seminar. The Arctic shipping route is of great interest in many countries due to its advantage of being the shortest route from Asia to Europe and the enormous natural resources that are nearby. Accordingly, despite the recent international situation, the international community continues to cooperate in the utilization of the Arctic route. There are many difficulties in commercializing the Arctic Sea route right away, but it will be used as a new logistics route someday due to the climate change will be necessary, and we must not miss the opportunity. Today, we are here to keep the possibilities of the Arctic Sea route open and take advantage of it. I'd like to ask the experts who attend today to freely exchange opinions and make policy suggestions. I wish all the participants the best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a really kind words from Mr. Yun from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. So as already mentioned, we are looking forward to have a year-round operation of, ships through the Northern Sea routes. So obviously, we will keep that in mind so that we can make, progress in the nearest future. Next, we will also watch recorded congratulatory remarks from Anne-Kari Hansen of INT, who is designated as next Norwegian ambassador to South Korea.
Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I will start by thanking Mr. Hong-Soo Yoon, Director General of the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, and Professor Sung-Won Hong from the Institute of Arctic Logistics and Yongsan University for inviting me to open this International Arctic Shipping Seminar. This is the first time for me to participate in an Arctic event in Korea. The Arctic, however, is not new to me. During my nearly 30 years in the Norwegian Foreign Service, Norway's Arctic policy has been an essential part of my responsibility, both as Director of the High North Division at the Ministry and more recently as Norway's Ambassador to Canada. I am therefore pleased to continue the Norwegian Embassy's tradition here in Korea of participating at the annual Arctic Partnership Week. The Arctic is high on the Norwegian government's agenda, and Arctic shipping is a central part of our interest. Norway has a long history of shipping in the Arctic, and we aim to continue developing our position as a leading, responsible maritime actor in the Arctic. In fact, more than 80% of the maritime traffic north of the Arctic Circle passes through Norwegian waters. As both a flag state and a coastal state, Norway has a special responsibility for facilitating safe, sustainable maritime transport and ensuring the necessary situational awareness. Norway is taking this responsibility seriously. We are investing in search and rescue capacity as well as in oil spill preparedness. From a security perspective, the illegal Russian war on Ukraine emphasizes the importance of a strong and robust northern Norway. We are now strengthening our defense, and we are also increasing military presence in our maritime area, including around offshore installations and other critical infrastructure in the north. For Norway, it is important that all activity in the Arctic is in line with the law of the sea. Respect for international law and freedom of navigation remains fundamental. International law applies in the Arctic just as it does elsewhere in the world. The UN Convention of the Law of the Sea constitutes the legal framework for all sea areas, including the Arctic waters. To contribute to a rule-based order in the Arctic, Norway plays an active role in multilateral fora with Arctic shipping on the agenda, including the IMO and the Arctic Council, where Norway will take over the chairmanship in 2023. The second point I wish to highlight is the priority of the Norwegian government that all maritime activity in the Arctic is safe and environmentally sound. Norway has been a driving force for the adoption of the Polar Code in the IMO. It came into force in 2017 and sets more stringent safety and environmental standards for ships operating in the polar regions. Norway highly values the close cooperation with Korea in the IMO and other multilateral fora. We have many shared values and interests. One of them is green shipping. Norway firmly believes that by contributing to the development of zero and low emission technologies for maritime transport, Norway can make an important contribution to the global climate and the Arctic environment. Our hope is that this will not only contribute to combating climate change, but also serve as the foundation for creating sustainable livelihoods in the North. At COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh last month, Norway and the United States launched the Green Shipping Challenge. The challenge encourages countries, ports, companies, and other actors in the shipping value chain to come forward with concrete announcements that will help reducing the carbon footprint from shipping. I was very pleased to see that the Republic of Korea has contributed to this challenge through facilitating the establishment of a green shipping corridor. Dear participants, many interests meet in the Arctic. In uncertain times like now, it is more important than ever that partners work closely together to find constructive solutions. We need cooperation between the Arctic states, observer states, indigenous groups, research and knowledge institutions, and not least the shipping industry. Forums like this one play a great part in fostering such cooperation. Norway greatly appreciates the cooperation with Korea on many aspects of Arctic matters, and I would like to especially thank you for your engagement in green shipping. I wish you a very successful seminar. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Well, once again, it was really kind words from the ambassador designate of Norway to South Korea. So obviously that there aren't common interests in terms of the Arctic region, and obviously there will be great cooperation as we move ahead. And obviously both countries have a great interest in having further cooperation as well. Thank you very much.
In celebration of the 11th International Arctic Shipping Seminar, Arctic Logistics Institute of Yongsan University and Center for High North Logistics are signing letter of intent on cooperation. So I'd like to ask Professor Kier Skobik, Managing Director of the Center for High North Logistics, and Professor Hong Sung-won of the Arctic Logistics Institute to come forward to the stage for the signing ceremony. The two organizations signed a letter of intent for joint research on the Arctic route in 2012 and have conducted joint research on the Arctic route several times. In response to the importance of green shipping in response to recent climate change and formation of North Pole routes, the existing letter of intent for cooperation was newly revised and signed after 10 years. In this agreement, the two parties agreed to cooperate in maritime transport through the NSR, the Arctic shipping, analysis on potential cargo volume in both east-west directions along the Arctic shipping, and research on transshipment ports through the Arctic routes. In addition, the content of the agreement includes reduction of carbon emissions from operating the Arctic route, development of green shipping route for the Arctic Ocean. And I'd like to ask the signing party to sign the letters placed in front of you. And when you finish signing, please exchange letters and sign the exchanged paper again.
자, 서명하셨으면
And we are now going to take a commemorative photo. And this brings us to the end of the signing ceremony. And now we're going to take a group photo. All the participants, presenters, and discussants are kindly asked to come up to the stage for the group photo.
줌에서 오신 분들 다
And we have every participant joining us online on the screen. Smile, please. You are all going to be on the photo. On the group, in the group photo. Smile. Happy. Thank you. And please be seated.
이것으로
This brings us to the end of the opening ceremony. And we are going to get started with the first session right away. And the first session is on the sustainability of international transit through the Arctic shipping routes, and it will be moderated by Professor Yoon Hee-sung of KMOU. Please welcome Professor Yoon with a big round of applause.
Hello everyone, it's really nice to meet you all once again. My name is Yoon Hee-sung. I'm from Korean Maritime and Ocean University. As already introduced, the first session is under the theme of sustainability of international transit through the Arctic shipping routes. And we have three presentations ready for session 1. The first presentation will be delivered by Managing Director of Center for High North Logistics, Kjell Stovik, under the theme of the perspective on Arctic Shipping Cooperation. Please welcome Mr. Stovik with a warm round of applause.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kjell Stovik. I'm the Managing Director of Center for High North Logistics. And I want to thank you, Professor Hong, and everybody for bringing us down here again. And also thank you for our 10 years of cooperation now. And again, signing this agreement is very important to us. I will speak a bit about the perspective of Arctic shipping and also in this sustainable way. And I was thinking of starting a bit by giving you some information about the center at the current stage, a bit about how we see the challenge that we can be solved through cooperation, and a bit about what we are looking at now on the environmental side and the reduction of emission, as the Norwegian ambassador mentioned, which is very important to the Norwegian government. I also put here that I'm also lead for a new Arctic thematic network in Arctic logistics and transportation, and also here EL is an important member, so I will see how we can proceed in that cooperation as well. The Center for High North Logistics was established back in 2008 and 9, and still is an important center when it comes to monitoring the sea route, and that's been our focus area for years. But we've also been engaged in different projects when it comes to climate, emissions, also in technology side, how we can bring the emission to zero, and I will come back to that in later presentations. But also it's important for us to be engaged in the new change, looking at new fuels and other type of perspectives when it comes to the climate. But also we also engaged in Arctic work, but also in the preparedness side, which also I think is important mentioned by the ambassador. I will start a bit by talking a bit about some of the challenges that we are looking at here. And up in the Arctic, we will see we have a lot of issues we can contribute when it comes to the global challenge. We have a lot of food, and that could be something that we can bring to the table of the world, but also we have energy and we have resource. And that's something that we, being an Arctic state, are very aware of. But also we have faced the challenge of climate change, which is now hitting Arctic a bit harder. But I also give opportunities, as we heard, and in a part of adaptation is the opening of the sea route. But also it's important for us to do this in a good way. So we are looking at circular economy, we're looking at how we can reduce the footprints. But as we heard now, with the current war situation in Ukraine, that also impact the market that we also was used to do cooperating with Russia. That means more pressure on the minerals in the north, and we expect that in the years to come. And the issue also we have in the north then, how can we then, like here is a pyramid of how we produce the fish in the north, how can we move it up the value chain? How can we bring more business to the north, which also need to be transported out? So we will see more and more activities in the north looking in the future. Access to energy is important, I will come a bit back to that. And access to investment. We need capital here if we want to challenge these possibilities and opportunities. And of course, infrastructure. That brings us back to the sea and what we are doing on that development. We see now, just after this war started, that there is a growing interest for other sea routes. For instance, the transporter sea route, as you can see in the middle of the map here. And I believe it is an opportunity as well that could be explored through this Arctic shipping cooperation that we are working on right now. We see less international possibilities at the moment when it comes to the Northern Sea route. But back to the traffic picture. Center for High North Logistics has monitored the traffic for years, and we still continue to do. We are sorry to inform you that we have closed our office in Russia for the moment, and due to the fact that we cannot transfer any funds, and also sanction makes that impossible to do. But we want to do this from our office in Kirkenes. And here is an extract over the first period of traffic. And still, as you can see, the voyages related to the Northern Sea route is very much focused around the Yamal and the activities that take place there. What we also have seen in the beginning of the year has been that there has been more or less the same activity as last year, and more or less the same type of activities on the different projects and different type of vessels involved. And we try now to also take other type of measures in our database. And here is one example of the age of the ships. Here you can see that it's quite new ships operating on the sea route. And that very much thanks to the new builds of ships here in South Korea. Bring us back to the latest developments. Since we have to close our office, we are very much delayed in our own information. This is one picture taken out of the statistics of Rosatom. Again, a lot of permission issued, not so much international traffic and not so much on the transit side. Rosatom says in its own statistics that they expect a decrease of 2.7%, meaning that they will amount to around 24 million tons this year. And they also say there is no international transit is expected. And that's probably the picture we will face the next years due to the war. And that's something that we need to adapt to, and our center is also in a transition that we need to work in other perspectives as well. But we believe it's very important to monitor the situation and to monitor what's going on at the sea route, and we will continue to do that. Here is one of our nice maps that we have produced, and we will still try to do that. This shows the traffic in January. There was also actually a transit taking place in that time from China to Murmansk, related to the LNG 2 construction site outside Murmansk. We expect that this construction site will continue to operate, and if it will be operational, it will be only one train that they are able to complete in the first phase. That means that the projection when it comes to the traffic in the future that Russia has set for the ship route will be much less than expected. If you see here now in February and also in March, there is traffic to the western part down to Spain, France, Zeebrugge, Belgium, Rotterdam, all these places where there is LNG terminal, these traffics continue. There's not any sanction on that, and it's important for Russia to export LNG, and it's very much needed in Europe now with the current energy crisis we have and the skyrocket prices on oil and gas. Of course, that puts Norway also in an interesting position. With this level of prices and demands, Norway, of course, making a lot of additional income at the moment. But we also at the same time to max our capacity to deliver to the European market. Same in April, same traffic, no traffic to UK because they have sanctioned the ships traffic from Russia, but still they deliver to the European coast. We see, looking back at this moment, that this is the area where we see a bit increase. Getting back to Northern Norway and energy, as a part of our center work, we're also trying to map out how we can build infrastructure, how we can position Northern Norway as an actor when it comes to producing new fuels, and also utilize the energy carriers, which is, for instance, hydrogen and ammonia, which we have produced for over 100 years. But also we look how we can electrify platforms, how we can use different type of fuels in this future scenario. And in Northern Norway, we have a lot of projects ongoing, up to 22 projects that we are monitoring. They are very able and have capacity if they get enough energy to go in this direction. We have green ammonia, blue ammonia. This is a project that we are monitoring close to Hammerfest. Green ammonia production, we are looking at wind farms in Finnmark, where our headquarters are, but also how we can produce methanol, other type of e-fuels, and also we're building now a big battery factory. This is typical fuels and new sources that can be very interesting for shipping and for our fleet in Norway, and also globally as well, as we heard Ambassador mention. We're talking about 10 to 15 billion of US dollars investment, and this is projects that some of those will come up. The challenge we have is, again, when you start to produce ammonia or hydrogen, you lose 2/3 of the energy in that production. So we need more electricity power, and this is, of course, the bottleneck. We export a lot of energy from Northern Norway, and some of it ends up here in South Korea. But we also have a lot of industry also that export very well to the international market. And here you see it's quite high production if you look at electricity, gas and oil. Up in North Norway, we have a lot of potential, and we have a lot of places, and we have an industry here, and that gives us, of course, opportunities. So if you want to come up to north to invest, you can have a very good investment climate. And you can see also the growth here. One example in one of the countries where we are based, where you see seafood and services, trades going much higher than the curve of Norway, who is the lowest curve here. But they say something that if you go up here, you have a good opportunity of making good profits. The bottleneck we face in northern Norway, and this is a common issue of all of the Arctic, is that we struggle with the demographics, how to keep the people, how to find the right talent, and how we can develop a society where we can take them and keep them. That's very important for us, not only as an institution with education, but also the government needs to give incentives to keep people, and we need to look how we can put this all together. So it's very difficult for us to only look at one sector, but we need to contribute to a holistic approach here if we manage to keep them. So we are ready for talents. If you want to come to Norway, you're welcome. Again, we are monitoring the situation in the northwest and the Barents region, and we see there it's a similar issue. We lose in this area, especially in the Norwegian, Finnish, Russian side when it comes to the demographics. This is a fourth site giving the same pictures. So northern part is we need to a radical change if we are able to keep up with the potential of business and the need for work power that we need. I want to focus more now on the green end, and this is the introduction to that, was that when we're starting to produce this stuff, we also need to see how we can establish a market for this. This is something that we will see now when we're going into this green shift. And one of the projects we are engaged in together with DNV, and Morten, who will speak later, is how can we do this in a way, how can we establish a way where we can go this direction. What type of fuel will we go in the future, and what type of fuel will we use on specific ships, on specific distance, is something that we are really start to focus now, and this is one project where we're trying to establish in the Nordic countries a way of doing this. And I believe this is something that also Korea as a big ship producer can be involved with. And I think already you have good projects that we can link up to when it comes to this. And we heard the ambassador mention at IMO level, yes, there is some progress, but still quite slow when it comes to this decision. That means that EU and the Nordic countries will probably establish regulations before we have a global. And that they will pursue this to a cooperation within Nordic and EU. So we expect that to happen. And of course, the green shipping program of DNV is very much in the center of this development. Again, but we need to create the market before we can move forward, and that's something part that we as a center want to be engaged. And we heard also the ambassador mention, and also that Korea is working on the green corridor. We think this, and we believe this is a way of the future direction. We think that also in the Arctic we can establish green corridors, create an environment where we can together try to find a way how we can scale this up. But also that needs involvement from different parties like the regulators, the cargo owners, and the shipping industry to find this way. And I believe this is coming much faster than we expect, and we are planning for different way of engaging in this project. And at the center as well, we are looking at autonomous ship. We are also looking at how we can install propulsion system like rotor sails and other type of equipment on the ships in a way of reducing the emissions. And there is also a much focus now in the north on the preparedness. As the ambassador mentioned, we are investing very lot in Norway for this. This is just a picture from an exercise that we were facilitating and leading outside a small factory at the coast of Finnmark. Typical place where you are much more left alone if something goes wrong. And that's the issue. If you have an accident in the Arctic, the population, and we need to keep the population there so they can, in a way, able to help themselves until they get support from the rescue service and others that can come to the face. Another thing that we are looking at from the shipping in the Arctic as well is that there is more picture of threats like hybrid threats, and also looking at cyber threats to the shipping industry. This is also an interesting area for us to work with, to be better prepared if something happens. So, to conclude, it's important for us to retain knowledge and still monitor what's going on the Northern Sea route. And together with you as our partners, we think we can find a way to do this. We expect more traffic to east and to Africa, increase in the east in the summer and partly in the winter when it's open. Continued traffic along the Norwegian coast from Russia, which again gives us the ability to make more focus on preparedness. Traffic is reduced and a little international traffic as well. There is sanctions regimes. We don't know when that will end, but we hope that if we find a solution and a peace in the war, there might be an opportunity to normalization again with Russia, but that's very difficult to predict. And we think also in the long term, ships can go the Trans-Polar route and the North-West Passage as alternatives. When it comes to cooperation and development, yeah, the green transition as I spoke about, lower the emission from shipping towards 2030 is 2050 is something that is already decided. We need to see how we can do this the best possible way as fast as possible together with all of you. Infrastructure for this new future fuel type and also port, what can we have in the port? Development around this is important. Security when it comes to the transport of this, because this is not easy to handle. Even though we have spent like 20 years in Norway to establish our distribution points and a security system around LNG, still to use ammonia, hydrogen, still needs a different layer of security, and this is important to plan for and look into. Yeah, future fuels I mentioned, and establishment of green corridors and preparedness finally. So I want to stop there and look forward to future cooperation, and again I'm very thankful to come here physically, and I hope this pandemic is not will stop so we can meet more often. So thank you very much and goodbye for now.
예,
Thank you for your presentation.
셰럴 스토빅 소장.
That was introduction by Professor Stovik, and he also talked about the current status of the NSR, and he also pointed out there is a lack of the sea route that crosses it, and he also touched upon the investment in renewable energy and the rise of economic activities there. And he also talked about the barriers there and the solutions to them. And in conclusion, he briefly mentioned the Nordic Roadmap project, and he also touched upon the safety issues, including the hybrid and cyber threats. Now let's move on to the second presentation, and I'd like to invite Professor Uto Shotaro from Hokkaido University Arctic Research Center, and he will be presenting us on potential and sustainability of international transportation on the Northern Sea route. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
So, dear distinguished experts, ladies and gentlemen, 안녕하세요. I'm Shotaro Uto from Arctic Research Center of Hokkaido University, Japan. And originally, so my colleague, Professor Otsuka, Natsuhiko Otsuka, planned to attend this meeting conference and present an in-person presentation. But unfortunately, he cannot come here. So I will present about these topics, potential and sustainability of international transportation on the Northern Sea route. And it was my honor to be here and present about these topics in this 11th conference. Okay. Okay, so before going into today's topics, I'd like to briefly introduce the latest trend of global marine trade. Okay, due to COVID-19 pandemic, the world maritime trade once faced rapid downturn in early 2020 and contracting by 3.8% in the first half of the year. But in the second half of the year, maritime transport volume had returned, and in 2021, maritime trade is projected to increase by 4.3%, according to the UNEP report. On the other hand, damage to the world supply chain network still remained. And then the Ukraine-Russia crisis has been stifling world maritime trade, changing global value chain and causing price escalation. And the crisis is posing an increasing problem, of which world maritime trade has been facing since COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, this figure shows how the utilization of Northern Sea route, NSR, has been risen and fallen. Yeah. And after the declaration of the opening of the Northern Sea route in 1987 by Mikhail Gorbachev, this is a very famous speech, declaration, but NSR cargo volume had decreased due to the corruption of former Soviet Union and following economic crisis. However, since 2010, against the background of appreciation of fuel price, freight market, and natural resource demands, so the NSR attracted shipping sector as an international trade for the first time, maybe for the first time in its history. Until 2013, trans-NSR commercial shipping of natural resources gradually increased. But in 2014, declining fuel cost, freight cost, and natural resource demands, and economic sanction against Russia, trans-NSR shipping again lost market interest. And on the other hand, total cargo volume of the Northern Sea route has been continuously increasing due to the LNG production from Yamal Peninsula and crude oil production from Kara-Sea, Russia. And at that time, NSR is becoming a new energy resource corridor for both Europe and Asia. And by Chinese shipping company challenge to trans-NSR shipping of general cargoes, so trans-NSR cargo volume again increased since 2015 and reached its record high in 2021. Okay, so let's see what is happening in the NSR shipping before and after the Ukraine crisis. And this figure shows the daily number of ships sailed along the Northern Sea route in July and August from 2018 to 2022. And the Northern Sea route shipping might be largely affected by the crisis. And up to the August of 2022, the number of ships sailing along the Northern Sea route seemed to be the same as previous years. But international trans-NSR voyage is not seen this year, and NSR might be a Russian domestic sea route, except for the Yamal LNG and crude oil transport. And in this situation, it seems that Japan's cargo owner would completely lose interest to the Northern Sea route for the meantime. The discussion of the NSR becomes, I think the discussion of the NSR becomes a long-term base and a long-term sea ice retreat in the Arctic Ocean. And this figure shows the types of ships sailed along the Northern Sea route in August from 2019 to 2022. And due to the pandemic, since 2020, cruise vessels disappeared. The amount of cruise vessels is written in this figure in green box. And, but LNG in gray box and crude oil in blue box transport remained. In 2022, COSCO's Chinese shipping company COSCO's Trans-Arctic shipment is not seen, but 100,000 deadweight ton bulker transported iron ore to China. And the Arctic LNG project plant module was shipped from China to Murmansk westbound in winter. But I guess construction of the module was stopped in May in Chinese yard. And then, so working vessels and heavy lift operations decreased. So on the other hand, let's take a look at the Northwest Passage. This figure is data by Headland and so on for the Polar Research Institute in UK. Until the pandemic, cruise and expedition voyage in the yellow bar in this figure was the main activities of the Northwest Passage, but they halted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Then it is reported that those activities are gradually restarting in 2022. And Trans-NWP, Northwest Passage, commercial cargo shipping is found since 2019. Wood pulp, carbon anodes, was shipped to Korea and to and from China. So how about Japan? Let's take a look at Japan's activities on Northern Sea route shipping. So far, 17 shipments have been carried out through the Northern Sea route to and from Japan since 2012. And this figure shows the destination and origin ports of Northern Seal shipping in Japan. Among them, Tomakomai, okay, and Kushiro in Hokkaido. Actually, I came from Hokkaido today, and received 3 times of shipment of forage. And Osaka, it's a Kansai, western part of Japan, received 4 times of whale meat shipment by refrigerated carrier. Ogishima in Tokyo Bay received 2 shipments of LNG from Yamaru LNG project so far. And in 2019, Tomakomai Futo Corporation Limited, Tomakomai Port Authority, and COSCO Shipping specialized carriers have conducted trial trans NSR container shipment from Helsinki to Tomakomai. Hey. So this slide summarizes the current situation of Japan's shipping sector. So first, there are 4 items I listed. So in the first items, year-round shipping. So sea ice retreat, as you know, are unable to expand summer navigable period. But it will be, still it is hard to find high ice class cargo vessel can sail the Northern Sea in winter season. And it is not easy to achieve competitive shipping cost in the near future. So this would be a matter of long-term view. And ice and weather forecast achieving both Russian information service, non-Russian commercial service, including Japanese ship company, and satellite remote monitoring of sea ice is also achieving. But I think still there remains many issues to be challenged on this issue. And so far from Japan's actual achievement on trans-NSR shipping, quick delivery and free from pilots was highlighted rather than the cost effectiveness after downslide of freight market since 2014. And Russian invasion to Ukraine. Yes, it clearly shows the country risk of Russia in terms of NSR regulation, icebreaker support, and other navigation service to foreign vessels. And economic and other sanctions against Russia lead to decrease of cargo potential. Also, cargo owner refrain from using Northern Sea route. So it can be said that commercial use of the Northern Sea route might become a matter of distant future when peaceful Arctic come back again. Here we see a new topic that reminded of navigational risk in ice waters. In November 2021, about 20 cargo ships stuck in ice along the Northern Sea in the East Siberian Sea and Chukchi Sea. And the ship must wait icebreaker more than 10 days at the longest. And for example, in this left figure, 2 barrel carriers and one general cargo vessel stuck in ice in the East Siberian Sea, and all 3 transiting NSR from Europe to Far East. This red circle in right figure indicates the water area where they became unable to sail. Then they met nuclear icebreaker, Taimyu, at the circle 1 on the right-hand side figure, and Taimyu took them to Chukchi Sea. And these incidents remind us of navigational risk in early winter when ice rapidly grows and the prediction is very difficult. So finally, in the last minutes, I'd like to summarize the key factors of commercial use of the Northern Sea route. We think that predictability, commercial feasibility, sustainability, cargo demand, regulation, and political stabilities are key factors for utilization of the Northern Sea Route. And particularly in recent years, uncertainty has been a key factor for utilization of the Northern Sea Route, such as unpredictable ice conditions, as I mentioned at the last slide, sensitive fuel market and freight market, and unilateral changing of Russian regulation. And the driver of commercial use can be found shipping cost reduction and shortening lead time, and also cargo demand between Europe and Asia. Cargo demand will change by cargo type, business model, seasonal demand of commodity, type of shipping service, economic relation between regions, and so on. And environmental sustainability, this is one of the most important issues for the utilization of the Arctic Ocean. But today, a most serious factor could be a country risk of Russia for private sectors. Basically, utilization of the NSR is a function of trade-off of these factors. And at this moment, unfortunately, risk and disadvantages overwhelms other advantages because of the risk and backlash against the Northern Sea Route due to Russian invasion to Ukraine. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
예,
Well, thank you for the insightful presentation, Professor Shotaro. Thank you very much. And what Professor Shotaro shared with us, that the increase and decrease of the cargo volume and what are the affecting elements, he briefly shared with us. And recently, together with the COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis in the Ukraine, what kind of impacts are actually in play. So it was very insightful to listen to his presentation, and what are the success factors to further develop and utilize the NSR, predictability, and also taking into account the environmental elements. And obviously, he briefly mentioned about the regulations, and last but not least, regarding the crisis in Ukraine, obviously, political stability is one of the important factors we need to take into account. So we will now move on to the third presentation of the session 1. And the third presenter is connected online. He's from Arcor Arctic, Mr. Alexei Shytrik. He's the development engineer of Arcor Arctic, and under the theme of the design of container ships for year-round Arctic transit navigation. Mr. Shytrik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Yun. And greetings from snowy Helsinki, and dear participants of seminar, dear colleagues. It's my greatest pleasure to take part in this Arctic seminar, even online. And after listening to my colleagues from Norway and Japan, I just remembered that almost exactly 10 years ago, I have participated in an international transit voyage. It was a first ever transportation of LNG via Northern Sea Route from Norway to Japan, aboard of Korean-built LNG carrier Ob River, and it was a great example of international cooperation in Arctic shipping. And before that, there were a lot of doubts if it is possible to transport LNG in the Arctic, but now LNG is a main cargo, speaking about volumes. And today my presentation, please, next slide, dedicated to container vessels for year-round navigation in the Arctic. And the first question nowadays, however, is such an Arctic container line is feasible at all. So first I will present some general personal and company view on the current background related to Arctic transit traffic and recent changes in navigational regulations. Sure that my colleagues in the next sessions will touch these topics in more details, and then I will focus on our design conceptual proposals and technical challenges we around navigation. Next slide. So main objective is to present our vision on container ship for Arctic transit routes, and we think it is very important to assess these challenges, no matter what kind of approach for Arctic development you prefer. Optimistic like Rosatom-Kaga, with huge plans of building a fleet of Arctic container ships. Pessimistic one like Myers company, which refused to use Arctic routes after one transit voyage, and even applying a step-by-step approach as Chinese COSCO seems to follow does not guarantee the constant success of every step. And next, please. And quick screening comparison of different options of Arctic transit routes in terms of time of voyage duration, with listed equal assumptions, assuming there are no any restrictions here, one route, the same vessel. So we can see that in present conditions, the Northern Sea route remains the best option for time, for possible time savings, comparing to the traditional route through Suez, and only this option is feasible to establish year-round navigation in the near future. Next slide. And here presented some opinions of the current situation around Northern Sea route. We made these predictions in April, and it shows that Northern Sea route remains of the highest importance for Russia. The export and delivery volumes remain the same, but speaking about transit, it is much more sensitive to geopolitical situation and to any changes in the rules of navigation in water area. Not the different scales on the graph for destinational shipping and for transit shipping, and just it can be seen that recent drops in transit volumes happened just after introducing the significant changes in regulations for Northern Sea route navigations made in 2013, and actual changes were introduced in only this year. Next slide. Generally about the rules. Now, with the introduction of the Polar Code, all Arctic transit shipping must be regulated by its provisions, and it allows to apply Polaris risk assessment system Canada retains the traditional system zones and restrictions, but also has implemented the application of Polaris with different situation is regulation of navigation along the Northern Sea route. As I already said, this summer, with introducing of recent amendments, now almost all the control came to Northern Sea Route General Administration, so-called Glavsi Morput, under Rosatom, and all issuing the permissions for navigation, icebreaker support, pilotage, hydrometeorological support, surveys, dredging, infrastructure development, now under responsibility of Rosatom, and only search and rescue support remained under responsibility of the Ministry of Transport. The admission criteria in the form of table with minor changes remained the same, with principles of dividing into zones and determining the current type of ice conditions and admission of ships of different ice classes according to this table. A very recent change is, however, is a transition from defining ice conditions entirely for each zone to defining type of ice conditions from the ice charts according to the current actual ice situation. We think that this change is a step to the same risk-based approach as in Polaris, and it is quite positive for navigators and for designers to have a possibility of more adequate assessment of severity of navigation and of choosing the optimal routes of navigation. Next slide. And a few years ago, we made our own hierarchic screening study, trying to take into account all the possible factors. We have used our transit simulation model and compared Northern Sea Route transits with transshipment or direct with traditional Suez route. Next slide. And here are some results. Of course, the situation is changing, oil prices, fuel prices changing, but after that study, our conclusion was that Northern Sea Route becomes more advantageous at very high TEU capacity of future container ships. And transshipment case gives the possibility to reload and not to use expensive ice-breaking vessels and to save the cost of transportation a bit. And basing of this study, we prepared two concepts. Next slide. We considered two sizes of Arctic container ship: 8,000 TEU capacity and even more, 18,000 TEU. 80,000 TEO version based on existing Yamal Max LNGC hull form, actually on a improved second generation vessels which are now under construction. And the next option is a stretched version. We also took into account current limitation of azimuth thrusters and two options for each vessels for with thrusters and with conventional propulsion developed. Next slide. Here, a general view of container vessel of 8,000 TEU capacity with two propulsion options, main parameters in the table indicated. And next slide, here a big vessel and main parameters also with two options of propulsion plant. And they look like conventional container ships, but differ from the such container ships navigating on conventional routes. And next slide. Here we try to show the difference between conventional and ice-class and ice-breaking cargo vessels, following the same principle used in Polar Code. We divided such vessels into three categories. The first one is close to conventional, and second, ice-strengthened vessels designed for navigation in freezing areas, mainly under ice-breaking support. And the third category is ice-breaking vessels suitable for year-round navigation. And you can see that they, on their parameters, their cost and installed propulsion power and its going capabilities, they differ very much from conventional vessels, and they are not competitive when operating in open water conditions. So, next slide. I want to present some conclusions we made. Our research and design studies confirmed that it is technically feasible to design a very large, up to 18,000 TEU capacity container ship with high ice-going capabilities, possible to operate year-round in Arctic routes. And for economical viability, such ships should be used as a part of transportation system, including transshipment hubs. And we're ready to develop further and to cooperate with ship owners and shipyards. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm ready to answer questions if during panel discussions.
예, 좋은 발표.
Thank you for your insightful presentation. And we are going to take the questions during the Q&A session towards the end of the seminar. And I really enjoyed your presentation. And you talked about the different approach about the container ships. And as you know, for containers, we have the the positive and negative prospects. And with this, you made an analysis, and we made an analysis on the Hamburg Sea, and it turned out the large ships had an advantage, and about 8 KTU and 18 KTEU. And the 18 KTEU with the transshipment was found out to be at an advantage. That was your tentative result. And we finished the first session earlier than scheduled. And we're going to have a break for about 15 minutes. And now we're going to get started with the second session. Thank you, Professor Yoon. And this brings us to the end of the first session, and we're going to begin the second session at 2:30 in about 15 minutes. Thank you.
예, 장내 저 좌편 뒤쪽에 커피가 준비되어 있으니 편히 드시면.
For your convenience, we have a coffee, tea, and refreshments available at the back of the conference rooms. Please enjoy yourself. Thank you.